Hello, my name is Charles Rhodes, and this is my video presentation on the disposition to be an educator. So, to have complete transparency, I do have some notes next to me, and I will be looking over periodically to make sure that I have my place. That said, let's begin. So, the strengths that I feel that I possess to be a good educator are first, I believe that everybody is capable of learning. I don't think that we learn at the same pace. I don't think that we learn in the same style, but that doesn't mean that we're not all capable. And I feel that as an educator, it's my duty to find that learning style and to cater that to bring out a person's potential. Um, that leads pretty comfortably to the next strength that I feel like I possess, which is fairness. I don't come into any situation trying to live by or strengthen a stereotype. I don't feel that a student riding a skateboard on the weekends or having an interest in loud punk rock music precludes them from being capable of being an effective student. On the other side of that, I don't feel like throwing a football or wanting to be a cheerleader affects your ability to be a good student. What affects your ability to be a good student is the environment that I'm able to facilitate as an educator. And that leads pretty comfortably into the next strength that I feel like I possess, which is fairness. Um, Again, I try to come into everything with a very clear slate. I don't want to take children from a certain background or social group or interest and then try to kind of hammer and mold them into either you fit my stereotype of what a good person and a good learner should be, or I try to strengthen this predetermined notion that I have by pushing you into a failing grade or not giving my best as an educator. And that's where I like to leave it. And I like to facilitate a good environment, an effective environment where people can come to learn regardless of how they dress, how they look, any of it. That also is to say that I don't fall under societal pressure to favor one group of people. I feel that everybody is also, in addition to being capable of learning, you are also accountable for your learning as well. Another trait that I possess is patience. I don't mind that something takes a considerable amount of time to get to the end. On the contrary, actually, I feel that most worthwhile tasks are actually also time intensive, and that's okay. I would rather take the time to explain and make sure that I'm understood than to try to push forward before someone is ready. And that also plays into my demeanor with people. Um, I'm from a different time and place. Throughout the 80s and 90s, there was this kind of notion that if you could raise your voice the loudest and present the most ridiculous punishment, that you could force conformity in learning. And I believe absolutely none of it, because I've seen the failure that that presents. And I'm not in any way trying to insinuate that I know the perfect way, but that is definitely not the way that I'm going, and I want to find a better way. Another strength that I possess, and a lot of this comes from my background working mental health, both past and present, and also just being a healthcare worker, is that while I am very warm to people and I am very inviting in conversation, I do respect boundaries, and that is all the more important in this day and time as we have so much access to one another's personal lives. I am not the kind of person that would snoop through one of my students' Facebook or Instagram to try to dig up the dirt, so to speak. While that might be well-intentioned, there's definitely something wrong with the thinking that if I interject myself deeply enough into the personal lives of my students, that they're better off. I think that is a very flawed way of thinking. Also, in terms of boundaries, um, while someone can be in my heart, that doesn't mean that they need to be in my home. I don't. I'm definitely not the kind of person that would want to go hang out with my students on the weekends. I've had to deal with that with my employees as well as my patients. There's a lot of the time been a strong push of let's stay in touch. And while I think that's very flattering, I do feel that part of being able to be safe and, for lack of a better term, loving or warm, is also being able to maintain healthy boundaries, right? So now that I've tooted my own horn a little bit and talked about some of my strengths, I would like to segue into some of the things that I could definitely work on to be a more effective educator. So to begin, I'm a little older than a lot of people that I go to school with, and I think that's fantastic because I get to see a new and refreshing perspective of the world. Um, Along with, I guess my age, I don't really know where this comes from, but I'm kind of a technophobe. I do not love computers. Um, you know, I kind of, I think that if you were to give a troglodyte an iPhone, they would interact with it pretty much the same way that I do. But as I move forward in this journey of wanting to be an educator, I do realize that my unwillingness to get with the times, so to speak, technologically, could definitely be a detriment to my students. So as I progress, part of my commitment to being a lifelong learner is I also want to learn the technology of the times. And that's going to take some work because I'm very far behind, but it is something that I'm committed to and that I know and that I have a devotion to working on. My other problem as an educator or going into education is that I'm very not good at keeping normal hours. I've spent the last several years working graveyard shifts, afternoons, things of that nature. So my awake time and my productive time and my me time is definitely in the late hours of the night and the wee hours of the morning. And I've been in situations with my past experience in student teaching and things like that, that I would go to bed at 3 in the morning and I would wake up at 6:30, and drag myself to the classroom. So going forward, as I student teach and as I teach, I'm definitely going to have to make my push to live a quote unquote normal schedule so I can be present and aware and coherent when I'm teaching or when I'm working, because if not, then I'm not being the professional that I could or that I should be. Looking at my notes here a little bit. As far as traits that I feel that all educators should have, I feel like first and foremost, you should and need to have patience. Not everything comes together in the way or in the time that we like, particularly not when we're dealing with a group of 20 to 30 students. And the minute that you lose your center or that you become upset, you undermine anything else that you would have done. There's something very pleasing when people lose their temper and things kind of go their way, but I think it's important to keep in mind that at best that's a temporary fix and that it's not something that we should rely on, because again, it has a tendency to undermine everything else that we're doing. Another thing that I feel that teachers should possess are a strong set of morals. A lot of that's we've gone over this week, but I feel like it's important to not let that waver. And a big part of that morality comes in the form of boundaries. And that doesn't start or stop at social media. That also means not interjecting yourself unnecessarily into students' home life. To give, for instance, for that, when I was going through school, I'm a hemophiliac, and that means that I have to take IV medication. And I ran into several times where I'd have to disclose that information, and I would have teachers that worked way too close and would try to get too personal. And while I understand that the intention was good, it was very uncomfortable, and it made me feel, or made me grow to be pretty reclusive, right? We need to handle what we need to know professionally, and that's where it ends. That includes the safety of our students, but we don't need to actively be pushing our way into home and personal lives, because that's not okay. And lastly, I feel like if you're going to be a lifelong teacher, you also need to be a lifelong learner, and that means keeping yourself in the know, so to speak, of societal changes and technology, as we touched on earlier. If not, you're definitely setting yourself up for a situation where you're not as effective as you could or should be. So that is definitely a last but not least. So here we are. This concludes my video of the disposition it takes for learning. I hope you enjoyed it. It was good to finally introduce a face to my typing. So thank you very much for taking the time to watch, and you have a good day or evening or whenever you took the time to watch this. Thank you.